Welcome to the Ethical Stitch, where fashion meets integrity and style gets a conscience. I'm your host, Michelle Alleyne, fashion strategist, educator, and sustainability geek. Let's unravel what it really means to create, shop, and live ethically. Welcome to the Ethical Stitch, where fashion gets real, raw, and responsibly redesigned. I'm your host, Michelle Alleyne. This show isn't about trends for trends' sake. We're talking about what really matters: the planet, the people who make our clothes, and the personal choices we make every time we get dressed. No filters, no fluff, just straight up purpose. Now, let's get into the green room, where trends get undressed and the truth gets stitched in. This is where we pull back the curtain on the fashion industry and dig into the conversations your favorite fashion mags won't touch, but we absolutely will. And I'm so excited. Today's guest is someone who's been shaping fashion education and the sustainability conversation before most of the industry even had a clue. She's been a personal mentor and role model to me, whether she knows it or not. Andrea Kennedy. She's a designer, educator, and sustainable fashion strategist with over 30 years of experience across all aspects: design, merchandising, sourcing, and sustainability. She currently leads Berkeley College's Fashion Merchandising and Management Department, where she's rewriting the curriculum to center circularity, future-facing partnerships, and impact. Andrea also served as VP of Sustainability at Material Exchange. She's led LIM College's sustainability strategy and was sourcing and sustainability lead at Fashion Dex for 15 years. I think that's where I first heard of her, at Fashion Dex. I actually used to use that data and information for my business. So I love all of what she's done. And I'm not done yet. She's a climate reality leader, a frequent speaker, and the author of several go-to fashion sustainability textbooks. Her mission: to equip the next generation of fashion leaders with the tools and urgency to rethink what this industry can be. So with that wonderful mouthful, I'd love to welcome Andrea Kennedy to the Ethical Stitch. I'm so excited to have you in the green room today.
Thank you so much for that amazing intro, Michelle. And I always call you the amazing Michelle, right? So I really appreciate being here. Thank you for having me. Congratulations on the Ethical Stitch. It's very much needed right now. I mean, there has been so much in terms of sustainability education and storytelling in the fashion space. And, it's not coming through all the way yet. There are still, every step forward, we take a half a step back, right? So, I mean,
Yes.
The fact that now that you're creating a podcast on this topic is really exciting, because there's been documentaries, there's been research papers, there's been articles, and, it's not moving the needle fast enough. So this is yet another way to get information to people, and I appreciate you for doing this. And thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. And you're absolutely right. I think that's why the podcast definitely came about. We need an extra push. We're all pushing, but I think we need a push and a jump, right? All right. So our top threads today, I'd like to just ask you a few questions. I'm so happy again to have you here with all of your knowledge and experience. You've spent your career guiding future fashion leaders. What values or principles do you most hope that they carry with them into industry?
Great question. I think the most important thing is for people entering the industry as well as people already in the industry for 5, 10, 15, 25 years who need to rethink and learn new ways to think, is to become systems thinkers and understand the consequences of their actions, not just in the short term, but in the long term. I mean, everything we do is for next season or maybe 2 seasons away. You know, as we're producing next season, we're sourcing for the following season, and we're really looking at our cost sheets and our logistics and our whatever compliance standards just to get us by for the next year or so, right? But we're not looking at how these decisions that we're making today will affect so many different areas of the supply chain. And, you know, even when you choose to pull away from a button supplier that's doing beautiful buttons for you for many years and then go to a cheaper synthetic one, for instance, and I'm not going to say slam any one country or anything like that, but, you know, where they're cheaper and they're synthetic, we have to think about in that decision, which might be good for your cost sheet that day. Now we are extracting more fossil fuels from the lithosphere. We are at a time where we're post-peak fossil fuel. We are using more energy to create these out of synthetic products to make this synthetic into a polymer that can be molded into these buttons or zippers or shoulder pads or whatever it is that we're using. We are then also putting people perhaps out of work at the factory that made your coconut button or your wood button or whatever it is that you're replacing, right? And they no longer have money to use in their local economy. So there are so many unseen issues for every decision that we make. So when we think about systems and we think about all of society and the environment and the people that are living on the front line and fence lines of the factories, of the facilities that we're choosing, then we start really making change. If we stop and just think for 10, 15 minutes about every decision, I think that that will help. I also hope that I think it's really urgent that people entering the industry today are thinking about place. Place-based thinking is another strategy in sustainability where, you know, you really try and reduce the mileage for, you know, if you are I'm wearing a patchwork dress, right? I mean, if I was to look at the bill of materials for this patchwork dress, I would bet there's at least 20 items on it, right? And that includes the label and the thread and the fusible and the hang tag and the zipper, and there's a hook and eye, and there's several different fabrics, there's a lining fabric, and so on and so forth. So when you look at when I have worked with brands in helping them dematerializing is another strategy for sustainability. But what we often see is that the cotton's coming from Brazil and it's going to China to be spun and into a yarn, to be ginned and spun into a yarn. And then it's going to Vietnam, for instance, for that yarn to be knitted into the fabric in what they call a vertical factory, because then it's also sewn into whatever it is there. But it's not vertical because it's already, all those raw materials have already been to Brazil and China before they got to Vietnam. So thinking about place means really reducing your supply chain and getting everything close by and eliminating those complex floating and flying goods in across the world, especially when we're flying them in because the drop is really soon, and reducing that so we can get everything close. But that means that we have to understand that then we have to redesign the product because we cannot countries have specialties. We can't get everything locally. So that also means producing the same style in several different places and using the material inputs from those several different places in each of those places. And those are going to be slightly different. So therefore, the same product might have some slight differences that won't be visible to the consumer's eyes for the most part. But to us as designers and product developers and sourcing professionals, oh no, that's wrong. That lining is a slightly different fiber or whatnot. But if it has the same characteristics, is the consumer going to know? But we can get this locally where we can't the other one. So, I mean, I really think the most important thing is long-term thinking, systems thinking.
To understand that it's all, it's a part of a whole, and to put that whole together in a way that we're not moving all over the planet with our supply chain because it's so complex.
Beautifully said, that we're part of a whole. We live in a closed system that is Earth, right? So if we're living in a system, then we all have to think about the system. And in that system is water and soil and air and people and trees and bugs and goats. You know, I mean, all kinds of beings are in this system. And to just think about all of them, I think is really important.
Right? Wow. So we can analyze a style and kind of write all of those pieces, all of the animals and humans and all of the aspects, the entire ecosystem that it affects in order to come up with a better way of doing all of this, right? It sounds not daunting, but it's a lot. It's very complex.
It can be done. If you really think of all of it, it can be done. And I'm optimistic. I have done exercises, and I was part of this exercise myself once. And then I tweaked it. It had nothing to do with fashion, but I tweaked it for fashion. And I learned it from the great Sherry McClam at Manhattanville College in Purchase, New York. But nevertheless, it's a world viewing exercise where, and how I've tweaked it is I get a bill of materials and a cost sheet. And with a group of students, I just did this recently at Berkeley College, is that in my circular fashion class is we looked at the bill of materials and the cost sheet for a leather bag. And I had students were pulled out of a hat what they were going to have as their role as they walked into the classroom. So perhaps somebody became like, you know, oh, I'm CEO of this leather handbag company, this global brand. I'm the design director. I am the sourcing developer. I'm the factory manager. I am from the leather factory. I am from blah, blah, blah. And the last person was a cow. So there was.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Well, actually,
I love that.
there was, yeah. And then we sat down. I gave them like 10 minutes to reflect, and they sat down, and the goal was the retailer wants this bag. They're going to buy a certain amount, 10% cheaper, and you still want to maintain your profit. You don't want to lose 10% profit. So now go into that. Oh, the retailer was in the room too. It was such an exciting conversation because, you know, every now and then the student who was the cow would be like, you know, but this is me, you know, it was just, and everybody was listening to the cow and to the person in the factory. So there was one person who worked as the factory manager and another person who was just the leather bag sewer. But when you start thinking about you have to think about this. And then the brand was like, you know, the retailer's like, I want my 10%. You've got to make this bag cheaper. And then the factory owner was saying, well, I will skip on labor then because, you know, and then the labor was like, but I have people, family to feed. And it was just such a great conversation. I've done this many times. I've even done it with brands. But with students who don't have a set system that like, oh, well, I've done it this way for 5 years, like coming, you know, they're so open to it. The conversation becomes really passionate and helps them think about systems and long-term and place and the world and all of the players. And I think that if more companies did exercises such as that and put themselves in different shoes and looked at their assortment plans and their buying plans and their sourcing mix and their cost sheets through several different points of view, still knowing they have to make a profit because you need to make money to do good things and to keep all these people employed.
Exactly.
But is there a way to do it to offset some of the prices of going up, you know, doing these good things? How can we offset? And that's when dematerializing comes in. So, I mean, it's all connected, but yeah.
That is incredible. I knew you would have a pathway and something tangible to work with to help solve this issue. I love that scenario. And
it's a great exercise. Do it in your next class.
I'm going to do that. Thank you for sharing. And I feel like we should share that with the public. The customer should be in the room as well, hearing from the cow, hearing from the laborer, the sewers, and just the entire team. This is incredible.
In a really big class. In a really big class, I have like somebody be the water, you know, like, but when in a smaller class, if you've just got, you know, 7 to 12, it's very different than when you're in a class of 20, but you can do it or 25. I've done it in all size groups, and it's always really interesting.
Amazing. I mean, beyond. I mean, I was going to ask you about students leading with creativity and conscience, but I think you just answered that question, and pushing for real change inside companies that they join. I feel like, again, this acting this scenario out so everyone can see and understand all of the moving parts and their pain points, because we're not breaking it down, and then being collaborative, everyone working together, the entire team. And you took it externally as well. You went to suppliers and the factory. I mean, I'm loving this right now. I have goosies right now. That was great, Andrea. Oh my goodness. I want to build on that. That's so good. Wow. And
Yeah,
I could stay there
we
all day.
We could probably put our heads together and build with it even better, even bigger. It is important. You talked about students leading with conscious. Wait, what did you say? With creativity
Leading
and
with
consciousness? Is that how
creativity
you said
and
it?
yes, and conscience, and bringing real change inside the companies they join. I mean, I know often I tell my students, take these ideas and all of these insights into the company you work for and share it with them and help them make a shift. But I don't want to get them fired. How would you recommend students in their new position going into a company that maybe not has embraced sustainability? What should they say when they have all these wonderful ideas?
So I have had students who have taken my classes come back to me and say, I'm the only one that's talking about this, and I'm teaching them, especially when we talk about using some of the tech programs like the Material Sustainability Index, the MSI from the HIG, or the PM, the product module from the HIG, or the BRM, right? These, they measure, and if you want to make change, you have to measure where you're at, right? And then you can manage it and create a new plan and change it and revise and see where are my hotspots that I should work on reducing first. So I've had students learning this and learning how to make roadmaps and strategies for just implementing, slow and steady wins the race in terms of sustainable change. You can't do it all at once, but what can we trial now? And they've walked in and said, well, I have an idea. What if we trial it? And they've been permitted to do it. They've helped others understand it. And they come back and they say, thank you so much. I'm the only one knowing this, and I'm teaching others. And this is a 23-year-old student teaching people who are in their 40s and 50s sometime how to think. And so I've had a few students that are, we can sit on our rocking chairs in several years or many years and be like, okay, they have they've had that ripple effect that we're really wanting to make, because if you can just change the way one thinks and they can change the way one more thinks and so on and so forth, I think then we've done a decent job. So that has what happened. But I think that in terms of students leading with creativity and consciousness, and I love the way you say that, 10 years ago, only 10 years ago, you would talk to a group of students about climate action. And I always start with a climate presentation and talk about why is the climate changing and how do we know it? Why? How do we know it? What's going to happen? And are there solutions that exist? And so forth. And 10 years ago only, students would be saying, I didn't know any of this, right?
Right.
5 years ago, a lot of them knew.
Okay.
But now everyone knows. These students, you don't have to tell them that climate change is happening. They're living, eating, and breathing it, even if they're in New York and New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and Connecticut, and this tri-state area, of at least that you and I are in, right?
Right.
So they see it in the news, they know it now, and they're anxious about it. Our students are, not all of them, there are some that zone it out. But a lot of them have climate anxiety and future anxiety. And I think equipping them and letting them know that, this has nothing to do with you, but you can change it, right? You can be part of a change. But so, and really helps them get excited and inspired. And then they feel like agents of change that are empowered with information and they can give to others. And I think that, I truly almost want to say that education for a sustainable future is kind of, when we empower youth with that knowledge, it's an act of service then for them to go forward to the future and share this knowledge, because it's just really empowering more people. And I think by giving this information to a whole generation of students at the college level right now is real, who are anxious about everything, not just climate change.
The future.
They're anxious about the economics. They're anxious about how they're going to pay. They're anxious about politics. They're anxious about so many things, but letting them know there are ways that you can measure this and that you can change this. And there are strategies, and let's put them together and, and really workshop them and then show them to a few brands and hear their feedback. And when they do that, and now make this into a beautiful takeaway piece that can get you a job. And when we do that with students, they are empowered, and they get to be creative, they get to be conscious, and they get to be change makers. And those are skills that employers are looking for, right? They want students who are not just going to enter in data into an Excel spreadsheet and be a buying assistant. They want that. They need those skills, those hard skills, but they also want those skills that can be communicators in a different way of change agency. And I think that education for sustainability helps with change agency.
Most definitely. I have students coming into class saying, wow, we should be learning this in elementary school. Everyone should be required to study sustainability. So I'm hearing you.
I mean, there are some elementary schools that are now have it in their curriculum, and yahoo for that. I mean, it should start K through 12 for sure. But as we said, with every step forward, there's a half a step back. So we're going through a stage where education and climate action is changing right now in this country. Hopefully just temporarily, but we'll just keep pushing.
Let's push. With that said, I'd love to hear more about your activity that's happening Tuesday, May 6th. You'll be in Albany, literally knocking on doors. What's happening? What's going on there? I wish I could join.
I know. I wish you could too. So that is the New York Fashion Act Day of Advocacy. It's a lobby day in Albany. I am not one of the planners of the event, but I am one of the planner of the whole New York Fashion Act flower making. These kind of symbols that are made of dead stock fabric saved from the New York City waste stream that students have spent 20 to 40 minutes each creating these handmade beautiful flowers out of dead stock fabric that say, I Heart New York, like the I Heart New York t-shirts, I Heart New York Fashion Act. But this whole event on Tuesday, May 6th is actually run by both the New Standard Institute and Maxine Badet, who is an author and activist in terms of sustainable fashion, and the NRDC. And so those two together, as well as some other really impactful individuals and educators, have planned the day. And this is the second year in a row that our students at Berkeley have been making these flowers. We get students turning out for this. This is, our students, again, they recognize they live in New York and in Brooklyn and in Harlem and in Bronx and in New Jersey, and they see social and environmental injustices. So they recognize, and they see that in my neighborhood, I can only shop at Rainbow Shop and H&M and wherever else. But, and then they go and get a guest lecturer who's telling them to buy better and buy from Patagonia and Eileen Fisher and Stella McCartney, which I never tell people just buy those brands. Those brands are amazing, but they're
expensive.
Are only for a certain individual, right?
Yes.
So yes, they are, right? So in some ways, it makes it sound like you have to have a lot of money to afford sustainable fashion when we only mention those brands, when there's so many other brands that we all wear, like a Levi's, who's doing a lot in terms of sustainability and climate action. So nevertheless, students are anxious about fashion, and they know that, and they've learned that before they even get to college, that, fashion is toxic and it's wasteful. And they've seen reports that the fashion industry emits 10% of the global greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and we're on track to be about 25% of the global gas emissions by 2040 if we stay on the track that we're on. So students are aware of that. So because of that, they do sign up for these flower making activities. And we have a group of students going on this bus. But the whole point of it is to really talk to elected officials and assembly persons in Albany and let them know about the global supply chain, how complex it is, how polluting it is, how toxic the chemicals used in textile and apparel making and garment dyeing is, and in farming. And, there's over 8,000 chemicals used in fashion, and many of them are known carcinogenics. The 5 most common ones are. So, there's so much we can talk about in terms of dumping chemicals in water and waterways near factories and how it's polluting soil, and you can't swim in it. You can't bathe in it. You can't drink it, etc. So, and that's just water. I don't mean to speak so much about water, but water is so important.
We need it, right?
So talking about that and asking brands that if the product is going to sell in New York State, and this is really for mid-size and large-size global brands only. So small brands that are, locally made, this isn't really going to affect them. But if we're selling it in New York State, that we really do ask for supply chain traceability to them, for them to at least start on the pathway to mapping their supply chain and measuring their impacts in terms of environmental, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, in terms of water eutrophication, which is pollution, in terms of water consumption, and in terms of chemical inputs. And so if you can start measuring those, there is, I believe it's 5 years that you'll have to do this, but you can kind of map out your progress there. And so that we are putting healthier goods for sale here in New York State at the big department stores and whatnot, because if nothing is going to make people change if it's not really the law, right?
Exactly.
So, there are some amazing initiatives at department stores where they're asking for, we will promote you better if you have X amount of sustainable practices or processes. And so people are already doing that just to comply to some of the new retailer standards, but they're optional. So once it's no longer optional and you're a big brand, think that that is going to drive change. Is it going to cost a little more? Yes. So therefore, you're going to have to offset that by changing some of your practices. Maybe, everybody on the design team
can we give
coach instead of first? Maybe maybe we're taking expenses away from our overhead elsewhere, right? So there's a lot of expenses at companies that are indirect costing factors to garments. That really is why we have to put so much markup in to cover. So can we look at all the other practices in our business and to bring those costs down? And, and I don't mean just by letting people go either, because that's kind of also something that is
that's not sustainable either.
There's so much to be said about the fashion sustainability and circularity spaces.
There's so much.
So I'm sorry if I didn't.
I want to know, is that for the Fashion Act specifically? Is that the legislation that you're targeting with this trip? Is it the Fashion Act? Is it that law?
Yes, it's a bill called the New York Fashion Act. This is the 4th year it's going in front of the New York Senate, and that it will have significant impact on fashion products being sold in New York State if it is passed. Now, there are 3 weeks left of the session after next week, so we won't know anything that happens next week. And again, I am not the person that's leading this. There are NRDC and the New Standard Institute are, but what will happen is that fashion professionals, students, many people from fashion companies and services will be speaking directly to the assembly people and meeting in their offices and explaining what the impacts of fashion are and what this bill can do. So hopefully the New York Fashion Act will pass. I'm not sure if it will.
I hope so.
But, the more people that come and talk about it, the more awareness around it.
Exactly.
And,
And I think that the people that are going there representing, this huge potential shift really need to communicate the way the legislators like to be spoken to. And I think that is about how much are you going to save me, right? Change it into a dollar sign almost, which is sad but true. Show them where they're going to save. And I know you mentioned it might be more expensive, but that's when I think we have to, rework how we attribute costs and include, like the movie says, the true costs, right? Include human labor, humanity, and all of that in the cost sheet. So I'd love to hear more when you return from your trip.
Exactly.
And that's a real exciting day. So kudos for you being a part of that, even though you didn't organize.
No, I didn't organize, but I'm going with some students. And I think that the more young people speaking to elected officials, the better. So getting back to cost, though, in terms of fashion and sustainability, when I started this work almost 20 years ago in terms of fashion and sustainability and sourcing for fashion decks, looking for sustainable materials. It was all about sustainable materials at that point. Sustainable fibers or fabrics woven or knitted from sustainable fibers, and sustainable is an adjective, right? But let's just say it was a recycled fiber, or it was, certified organic or whatnot, whatever the fiber was at the moment, or it was natural dyed, etc. Was sometimes 90% more per meter or per yard than the traditional or conventionally made one. And it was hard to do that. The good news is, as a lot of these solutions have scaled, the price has come down, and sometimes now they're only 20% more. It's no longer, and for a product that only takes 2 yards, for instance, or 2 meters, 20% more, you can offset that somewhere else, right?
Exactly.
So I feel like, no, that's just materials, but materials, when you look at an LCA of a fashion product, materials is usually the largest hotspot, because there's so many virgin inputs in materials. And there's also that complex supply chain. So you have the big logistics part. So using better materials, or even keeping materials in use to make new products, which is part of what circularity is really extremely important, as well as all the other sustainable practices and methods that there are. So really choosing better materials is quite important.
Right. Maybe honing in on specific textile suppliers, creating, a collaborative effort and focusing where those particular suppliers use sustainable resources, create sustainable raw materials, and focusing on those few suppliers at first so that the price, demand increases, the price lowers. Thinking along that realm could be helpful. I don't want to eliminate suppliers. That's not what I'm saying. Collaboration is key.
Oh,
collaboration is key.
Collaboration is key, and it can happen in multiple ways. You can collaborate with a factory in terms of, if you want them to put in a closed loop water system or something like that, so that you can say you're using 100%, you're using 100% recycled water.
Right.
Just asking a factory who is low man on the totem pole to put in this new system is really difficult. So if you can, work with the other brands that they produce with and contribute to that. And then, so now my brand and these 2 other brands together, we each put in maybe 20%. And then now the factory only has to put in 40%. And you commit to many more years of using them. You've built a relationship. You've made collaborations with someone in your supply chain, and collaborations with your competitors even, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's when true collaboration and partnership happens.
Yes.
But we can't just ask these factories to put in all of these better environmental systems without some investment. And then collaborating with these factories and asking them, about what waste they have, and how can you utilize that, and how can you come up with a solution together on waste. The one really major thing about fast fashion is that we are buying it so fast because of, an addiction to fast fashion due to social media. We're using it so fast and then tiring of it so fast. And it's a real big burden to waste streams, no matter where that waste stream is. We have an issue with landfills. They're filled to the brim, and they are emitting more synthetics into our soil. And so and methane into the atmosphere. It's a real problem. And these they are filled with so many textile products. So it's really important more than ever for sustainable practices and circular practices when we're making new goods, and not just to be using virgin raw inputs when we're making new goods. And I think that's the most important thing, is to make with the materials we have.
And what about consumers? I mean, I feel like they're being left out of this piece. You mentioned them, but what would you say would be steps that the average person, the average consumer can take, that's not a part of the industry? How can they get involved here and be a part of the solution? Because we're catering to their demands, actually, when we're creating all this fast fashion, we're selling it to these consumers who are probably not even aware of all of the detrimental aspects of this product. So any ideas for what steps they can take, the consumer, the average person can take to be a part of the solution and not support fast fashion?
Yes. But before I answer your question about what should we share with consumers, what I would like to say is that my work in the past almost 20 years has really been to not shame the consumer for shopping.
Right.
And, there's so many reasons that people shop, because I was asked to, and I don't want to stay home alone. So it's a social thing. It's good for my well-being. It makes me feel like I fit in, or what. I mean, there's so many reasons people shop, right?
Right.
And they're not all bad. And to tell people, oh my God, you should only buy 10 items and wear those 10 items constantly, to a young person, or even to you or I, we don't want to just wear 10 items. I mean, let's get real. So I really feel like the manufacturers should have the responsibility in this, without a doubt. I feel that the brands and the retailers and all of the makers really need to better design a system. However, can the consumer help with that? Accelerate that? Yes, they can use their dollar and only buy better products, or use their voice and email companies and say, I love this brand, but I know that you are doing this, this, and this, and I don't want to buy you until you do this, right?
That's great.
And if a brand like an H&M or any of those brands have these products that are made with recycled inputs or part of an eco-conscious collection or whatnot, buy those products, right? From, if you're buying brands. Also, you can, as a consumer, give business to the repair services. There were so many more repair services before COVID, and a lot of them closed during COVID. Shoemakers, right? And dry cleaners were affected so bad because people weren't wearing nice shoes and wearing their suits, and, they were sitting around wearing leggings and things that they could throw in the washing machine. Giving that business back to those repair, keeping the things that you have, those products in use. So more brands put those practices in, and have those, buy it from us, but then we will tailor it for you type practices. And some of them have that, right? But those are higher end. If we can get it back to that practice that everybody starts doing that, then I think that that's really good too, because once something fits you beautifully, you keep it longer.
True that. So it sounds like collaboration, and more collaboration. We all have to work togetger in this effort.
Collaboration and communication, right?
Okay.
So let everybody know what you're thinking. And you can still have a creative new product that is circular and sustainable and responsibly made. You may not have as many of it.
Right.
Because we might not be making batches of 10,000. Right.
Every episode, we like to spotlight a change maker who's helping restitch this industry for good. Andrea, who would be your Stitch Mob MVP? A change maker that you can spotlight, who's doing the work, lifting others, and pushing the movement forward. Any companies or individuals that you may be able to think of that you can name here, our Stitch Mob MVP? You yourself?
Cotopaxi. No. Cotopaxi is the brand. Okay. Annie Agel is director of sustainability there. And you put me on the spot. I had to pull someone up. And I feel that she is an amazing agent of change who is a systems thinker, who does talk to factories and try and solve their problems in terms of waste with them.
Mm-hmm.
She does think about place. She thinks about climate action, and she thinks about people every step of the way. And if you look at Code Epoxy, which is a niche outerwear and bag type of a brand, the work they do is amazing. And I also especially love their Del Dia collection that is made from waste from many brands. And I think that really shows you true collaboration.
Definitely does.
Another
Incredible.
amazing change maker I can think of.
Yes, please.
A big global brand that is the opposite of a small niche brand is the, what is her, I think she's manager of sustainability and social consciousness, but maybe she's director. I hope she has gotten a promotion. Archana from Steve Madden is, to something like shoes, which is made with all some types of synthetic molds and insoles and glue and all kinds of whatnot, right?
Yes. We need to redesign
really working to measure and manage their products and make them more responsible. And I feel is a true agent of change.
Fantastic. Wow. Thank you so much. I'm glad you brought in shoes.
In terms of retail, I'm going to add one more in terms of retail.
Please do.
Bring it. Talked about two brands. I also think what Ali Mize is doing with the Neiman Marcus Group in terms of sustainability is amazing. So those are just three people I can think of. And you with your Ethical Stitch.
Oh, wow.
Podcast, I think, is really important too.
Oh my goodness. Well,
because you're really working on that Thank you. You're really working on that communication and education piece. And the most important thing right now is everybody can work and work and work. But if we don't, and that's important, we need our noses to the grindstone, but we also have to be good storytellers to make sure that people understand why we need to switch our practices in manufacturing and distributing and sourcing and selling and taking back and redesigning and reselling products. Is really all working towards a more equitable, just, and sustainable and climate conscious future. And it's critical that we do that right now. So thank you.
All right. So for my people out there, if there's one thing to walk away with today, it's this. Start where you are. Fix what you've got, ask better questions, and remember, every dollar you spend is a vote for the kind of world you want to live in, and that's impact. That's a wrap on episode 3 of The Ethical Stitch. If you laughed, learned, or had a few moments that you loved, please pass it on. Tag us at Michelle Alleyne and at The Ethical Stitch, and tell your crew we're not just talking fashion, we're talking future. You can catch us on all the usual spots, Spotify, Apple, iHeart, wherever you get your weekly dose of real talk and conscious style. We are there. And until next time, stay sharp, stay fly, and always stay stitched in. Thank you all so much. Thanks for tuning into The Ethical Stitch. If you loved this episode, share it. Rate it and tag me at Michelle Alleyne Official. The revolution in fashion starts with awareness, and you're already a part of it. Until next time, keep it ethical.